All right. Hello, everyone. This is a small video that I'm doing for RenderQ. Well, it's actually going to be a video series because I keep getting fucking asked to do it. And I thought it was about time that I revisited it because, frankly, my first video on RenderQ was not good. Anyway, um, so for those who have been following around with following my channel for a little bit, you'll be wary of the other methods of splitting. So stuff like trapdoor queue, stuff like gravity queue, where you're just dropping it from a great height, that's all standard for the slower cannons. Now, as you start to get into cannons that rely on higher speeds, or more closely timed, say, powers and hammer that you need to split apart, you're going to start relying on render queue. So render queue is basically a way to split your powers, your hammers, everything like that apart for super fast cannons. So anything above 2 sec, you want to split with render queue. And it's basically you're going to struggle to split anything else with like trapdoors and gravity queuing without render queue. Just it will depend on the setup, but I find it's much easier to split it with render queue at these higher speeds. Anyway, this is the cannon that I wanted to explain, like what render queue is and how it works, like the fundamentals of it, and then I will actually make a few almost like prototypes or test runs to show you guys how to properly time it out and how to properly set it up to split it. Anyway, so there's two main types of render queue. So there's shot queue, which is physically splitting apart. It's basically physically splitting apart things in different shots. And then there's splitter queue, which is like physically splitting apart in between shots. So splitter queue is basically primarily used for hammerlesses. So if you imagine you're dropping two powers in a hammer in the exact same area, you want to split that apart. So you would use splitter queue to change the trajectory or the triangling of your powers in your hammer to effectively split it up so that you can get your hammer in your barrel to get shot out and your powers basically in the barrel as well, but in a different position. So anyway, what I'll talk about first is the shot queue. So for this cannon here, we are going to use just this note block here as a reference point, this note block as a reference point, and then this obsidian block. And what this basically is this is power 1, this is power 2, and this is our hammer. So if we're just going to use this as a reference point, it's two redstone ticks between them, so it's going to look like 0, 2, 4. So power 1, power 2, hammer for our first shot. Perfect. Now, seeing as we're dumping everything into this little area in here, and then we're shooting it forwards and up, we don't want multiple powers. Well, you can, to be honest, you can have multiple powers in the barrel, but in this case here, for a hammerless, you do want to be splitting your powers apart, and that will become more evident when I sort of talk about the actual splitting of the hammer. Anyway, this is more for like your boosters when you want to say split away your first OSRB hammer from your second OSRB hammer. Anyway, so 0, 2, 4 is for our first shot. Now this is a 0.6, so this goes 0, 2, 4, and then it basically cycles back over, and this goes at 6, then 8, then 10. So it's going to look like 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So the first split here, first goal here is to split away our two or all our powers and all our hammers into distinct shots, so we can split them further. So first thing here is we need to split, basically we need something to split between our first hammer and our first power of the second shot. So this relies on a fairly good knowledge of OOE. If you haven't watched my videos on OOE, please do that. It's fairly reliant on you knowing how OOE works at a fairly high level. So I'm going to continue on from this point in the video, assuming that everyone knows how OE works. Anyway, so what we're going to try and do here is we're going to split 4 from 6. So four's our first power hammer, 6 is our or 4's our first shot hammer, 6 is our second shot power. So we want to distinctly split those apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to render something in between them. So I'll just paste that in chat again. So in this case here, what I did is I rendered a piece of TNT at 5. So first of all, first to stack. So power 1, power 2, hammer falls for the first shot, and then this piece of TNT falls, and then power 1, power 2, hammer of our second shot. So in this case here, I have the TNT. I think it's this one. That's our render queue in between those shots. Anyway, so just going to ignore that for the time being, and we are going to imagine ourselves as the power and the hammer. So we fall into here, and then these boosters here, this is a fairly standard arrangement for low Y infinite boosters. We get shot forwards into this barrel here, and now this is where the magic happens. So this is a fairly standard hammerless arrangement. I tried to use a different arrangement for this cannon, but I couldn't because I was using multi-game tick flight. So in this case here, what I'm doing is I'm using this booster here and the fence gate and the trapdoor here to split away our powers. So the neat thing about render queue is I'm pretty sure tripwire hooks and trapdoors, all that sort of stuff gets like activated instantly by redstone. So it's not like a repeat or anything. So what we basically do is we have some tripwire hooks connected to trapdoors to basically we time those at a certain time to essentially close at a certain time. It's a bit hard to explain, to be honest, but might be a bit easier for me to physically show you what happens. So at redstone tick 5, this dispenser here fires. So what happens is we have all our powers loaded into this little spot here, or all our powers, all our hammers loaded into there. We have a booster back here, and we have our render queue falling out there. So what happens is, first to fall, first to stack. So the first thing to get like rendered and calculated is our TNT. So I'm just going to ignore that fence gate there for the time being. So we're just going to pretend like that's just a solid block of obsidian. There is a fence gate there, and I will explain that in a second. I should replace that as well because I will forget about it. I think it's here. There we go. No, it's this way. There we go. So, again, first of all, first to stack, fundamentals of OE. So the very, very first thing to go, the first thing to be rendered is our power 1. So power 1 goes in here, gets sits here, and then when this booster goes off, it gets shot up into this grindstone, forwards, and then we say it hits a solid block there, and just because I've got the booster aligned to a wall there, it triangles out to the right, and that way is the barrel. Cool. Second thing, our second power comes in here, it's rendered at 2, so it's the second thing to get rendered, goes up, hits this grindstone, goes forwards, hits that, goes into the barrel. Cool. Hammer, again, comes in here, sits here, shot up, goes forwards. In this case, the fence gate opens. We'll ignore that for the time being. We'll just say it gets shot out, whatever. And now, this is when we have our render queue go off, or in this case here, our shot queue. Now, our shot queue, because it's rendered at 5, falls, or it gets, like the new position comes after the hammer of our first power, but before the power of our, or before the, well, after the hammer of the first shot, but before the power of the second shot. Perfect. That's what I mean. So this shot queue here falls in, and then that shot queue hits that tripwire there, which in this case here, that tripwire there is wired to this trapdoor via, there's a piece of redstone there, it's a bit hard to see, and that trapdoor closes. And then the next thing to get rendered is the first power of our second shot. So first power of the second shot ends up here, gets shot up, can't go forwards because there's a trapdoor there, so it just falls back down. Exact same thing, second power of the second shot, up, forwards, hits the trapdoor, falls back down. Hammer of the second shot, up, forwards, hits the trapdoor, falls back down. So now we have successfully split apart our powers and hammer of our first shot, and our powers and hammer of the second shot. Perfect. Next challenge now is splitting our hammer out of our powers for that first shot. So in this case here, what we're going to do is we're basically going to use the exact same thing. So 0 to 4 is what we're dealing with, and we want to split between 2 and 4. So what we do, or what I did in this case here, is I inserted some render queue to be timed at 3. So it's essentially like, it looks like that, but what it really is 0 to 4, because like the render queue is never shot. It's just used as a method of splitting things apart. Anyway, so first power goes off, second power goes off, then our render queue goes off, and then our hammer goes off. So everything's falling back down. In this case here, this is my render queue here. Everything falls back down, goes in, sort of just follows the exact same thing as before. But now the key difference is this trapdoor's still open for the first shot. We basically reset time to what's happening with the first power going through. So everything ends up here. This booster ends up here. This booster fires. So first power goes up, hits this grindstone here, goes forwards, hits this fence gate, goes into the barrel. Cool. Second power comes in here. Second thing to get rendered, goes up, hits this grindstone, goes forwards, hits that fence gate, enters the barrel. Awesome. Now we have render queue rendered at 3. So our render queue is the next thing that falls. So it falls down here, hits this trapdoor, well not this trapdoor, this tripwire, sorry. And what it does is it opens that fence gate. So what that looks like in the barrel now is that fence gate's open. So hammer comes in here, sits there, gets boosted up, hits the grindstone, goes forwards. That fence gate is no longer blocking the hammer, so it just goes straight through. And then where that soul sand is, that is a little, that's essentially like a little sand compressor for my OSRB sand stuff, but sort of besides the point. The hammer is now separated from our powers. And then this is why the shot queue is so important. If we didn't have shot queue here, our first power from our second shot would go up, and then it would go through that fence gate and it would get shot with our hammer. So again, we've got our render queue going off at 5. So when that render queue falls in and it closes the trapdoor, that means nothing can go through anymore. So that blocks everything else from just flying through that fence gate and getting shot out with the hammer. So that's the main difference between our shot queue and our render queue. I'm going to do another 2 videos after this one to distinctly show you how to wire them up, how to time them, how to troubleshoot them, and then how to get everything working. And I'll do that with a test rig. But in this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fill the cannon. I'm going to start firing the cannon, and you will see how this looks in real time. So you can see that's our hammer exploding up there. And if I turn off the explosion particles, you can see that that trapdoor's closing again. It's blocking some TNT from going through. It's letting some power go through to here. It's just cycling so quickly that it's a bit hard to see the power's exploding in the barrel. But if we turn explosion boxes on, yeah, the screen lights up. So our power's entering the barrel here. Our hammer's entering this comp, getting boosted forwards. You can see it occasionally there. It's just cycling so quickly that that the visuals don't really show it well. But enters the barrel there. I actually have extra shock cue there, but I'm just going to ignore that because that's not really shit. That's going to blow the cannon, I think. No? Lucky. Okay, I did place it in the right spot. Perfect. So yeah, that's basically the fundamentals of how Rent-A-Queue and how Rent-A-Queue works. You can see there that they're just essentially just falling through the tripwire hooks, and I've just got them just blowing up underneath the cannon. There they are there. Cool. So yeah, this is going to be the first video for a 3 video series, maybe 4 videos, showing how Rent-A-Queue works. So I'll go more in depth with how to properly time out the shot queue in the next video, and then of course in the video after that, I'll do the splitter queue. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something new, and I'll catch you later.